safe space. We ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we taking the quest. Join Tarcia on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarcia Smith, and welcome back to another week and another story. Before we dive in, y'all already know, please like, share, follow, go tell all your friends to do the same thing. And y'all start leaving comments. Let me know what you think about these shows and these stories, all right? All right, no more of that. So without further ado, we have a transracial adoptee with us in the building today. Hello, Will.
Hello.
I'm not even going to attempt to say your last name, so we're just going to stay at Will.
It's pronounced Uhrlaub, but it might change, so it's all good. That's my German adoptive last name. So I'm thinking about getting it switched back, but we'll see. But at the moment, Uhrlaub is just and then Laub.
Okay. I didn't want to butcher that because I was about to.
People really do.
I know that you were adopted at 2 years old.
Correct.
And you are of Haitian descent.
Yes.
And you were adopted into a white family.
Lord
have mercy. Here we go. Okay, so let me ask you this first question.
Okay.
Where are you? Are you in the United States? Let me just start there.
I'm currently in the U.S. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Okay, and is that where you grew up?
Oh, absolutely not. I moved to Dallas-Fort Worth for school when I was 19 years old, or 18 years old. I moved down here. Prior to that, when I was first adopted, I lived in Kansas.
Wait a minute. First adopted?
Yeah, like when I was adopted at 2 years old. I was when I first landed in the States, I was in Kansas. And then from there, we went to Missouri, back to Kansas, Arkansas, back to Kansas, Georgia for a while, Alaska, and then Texas.
Okay. Let's back up to 2 years old. My God. Okay, 2 years old, landed in the United States. So did your parents go to Haiti to adopt you and then brought you back?
They did not. So I have a lot of pictures of this, but let's dive in. So
let's dive in.
I came to the U.S. at 2. When I first came to the U.S., my parents had not come to Haiti. They did not go to Haiti. They saw pictures of me, of course, but they didn't interact with me whatsoever. I have a very early picture of me at the airport in Miami being handed from my Haitian caretaker over to my adopted parents. Wow. So that's one of the first pictures I have of my adoption family. It's just there at the airport, but being handed.
But why did you came to the United States to be adopted?
My adoption was facilitated in Haiti, but they never came to Haiti. And so then when it was time for, when I was approved and I had my paperwork and my visa and all of that, I had a Haitian caretaker that brought me from Port-au-Prince at the time and flew with me to Miami, and then my adopted family met me in Miami. Essentially, on the Haitian side of things, it was very interesting, which I'm sure we'll get into. I was somewhat kidnapped in Haiti. And then, of course, I was facilitated here in the U.S. But to answer your question, my adopted parents had never physically seen me until I landed.
Okay, we got to go back. Kidnap.
Well, it's very interesting. So, like in the Haitian side of things, there's a lot of unscrupulous adoption that takes place. So, for example, the story that we were always told was that essentially my mother had passed away. That my mother had passed, and that I didn't have any support, and that's essentially I was an orphan, and that I needed to become adopted. My adopted family, they were very fundamentally Christian. And so that was one of the driving factors. They were saving the world and saving Black and brown folks, and wanted to ensure that I was given a correct path. And so that was the driver on their end. Additionally, my adopted parents couldn't have children of their own. So it kind of filled both gaps for them, both the religious gap as well as just the need for family. They had previously adopted someone prior to me. He was white. I have an older white brother, but he's maybe 10 years older, and he was out of the house by the time I arrived. Having said that, in Haiti, when I was adopted, I had my mother. I had my entire family. The way that I ended up kind of in the Haitian system was that about a year old, I broke my leg. So I learned all of this when I went back and found my family. It's a long conversation I'm sure we'll get into, but to stay on track, I broke my leg at like a year old. And at the time, it wasn't against the cultural norm for if you had something like that for you to leave the home and go to a place of care and stay there for a little while. So on my mom's end,
wait a minute, hold on, a broken leg, and then you would go to a place of care.
Yeah, I had a broken leg, and then they couldn't take care of my broken leg in the village. Wow. Is the story that I was advised.
Okay.
And so I ended up going to Cap-Haïtien, which is a much bigger city in Haiti. And the location where I was taken to was supposed to, he's supposed to be a doctor, supposed to be taking care of me, all of this. And parts of this are murky, so that's why I'll say I just can go by what I was advised.
Sure.
Once I was there, though, he was actually running, in Haiti, we call it an illegal adoption ring. And I found out a lot more when I went back home. So make a long story short, he facilitated scenarios and situations in that orphanage to really drive people. And what I mean by that, I have pictures. When I went there, I was fat. When my adopted family adopted me, I had a distended stomach. I had my ribs were showing. I was malnourished and my hair was red. But remember, back then, this is the 80s. Yeah. In order to kind of hit the trigger for folks to adopt you, no one wants to adopt a fat, well taken care of child. They want somebody who's in need. So you have to create those conditions in order to drive the market in order to get paid. So it was all a payment thing in Haiti.
Look on my face right now. Did you see the look on my face right now? Because what I'm visualizing is those commercials, again, in the 80s that you would see on, and I know exactly the vision that you're talking about, because that's what you would see on TV, and come help for 35 cents a day and blah, 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 and this, that.
So my parents here in America, my adoptive parents, and we'll get into their side of house in a while, but they, of course, think that, they need me. They want to save me. They want, they have this child who's malnourished, going through all these conditions. Meanwhile, back home, my mom's frantically trying to get me back. She's being threatened and going through a lot of things on the Haitian side of things that we may or may not get into, but they impacted that side. So you have this division.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put a pin in that. Hold on, because we're going to I'm going to loop back around to that. Let me move forward a little bit in time to where you start having a memory of, growing up with this family. And because you have an older sibling that's 10 years older than you, are you the only child in the house?
I am the only child in the home.
Okay. And from your early memories, what is that like? Are you in an environment where are you the only Black person there?
I am the only Black person there.
Okay, so this is the environment so tell me about what that was like.
So some of my earliest memories, honestly, one of my earliest memories was really understanding that I was different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But I was scared and I was different. I'll try to stay linear. Earliest memory was having nightmares consistently and being unable to sleep almost every night.
What did your parents say? Are your parents aware of this? Are you too young to even?
My parents are aware because I wake up screaming and crying. On their end, they're saying that I'm from Haiti, that there's demons and spirits from voodoo that are tracking and following me, and that I need prayer to eradicate all of those issues. So I'm going to pin that there for a second, because you asked me one of my earliest thoughts. One of my other earliest memories is very integral to this whole conversation, is that the guy in Haiti who facilitated my adoption came here to the U.S. when I was about 2.5. So after about a year of being here, he came. And that was one of the times where, as a child, I may have been 3, I knew I was different, but it really sank in because he came and he was patient as can be. I don't really have memories of being in Haiti. But he came, I just remember saying, oh, this guy is extremely dark. I'm 3 years old, but I'm just recognizing that he's darker than me, but we look very similar, and he's nothing like my parents, my adopted parents. He's nothing like them, and he's telling them about things from where I'm from. I just remember that. He told my parents at that time that my mother had passed, which is what I kept with me for a very long time, which is what they kept. So we'll pin that there. But he came and visited. And so as some of my earlier memories, it's number 1, I'm different than them. Number 2, this person has come. He's from my country. He looks completely different. But even when he leaves, my parents said, "Oh, we're glad that he's gone because like we just didn't like the energy and the spirit that was there. You are now here with us, and you don't have to worry about that." But I was happy. I was like, "Oh shoot, I'm seeing somebody look like me."
Right, absolutely. And that was, I can't even get my words together. You were so young, that might have been the first time you had even seen anybody that looked like you.
Yeah, after I left Haiti, I can very much believe that was probably true.
Yeah.
Like I remember after that, the next time I saw somebody who was black.
Wow.
Which was like 4 years later when I was around 6, and we went to a convention for church, which is a whole other conversation. Because in the midst of all of this, my adoptive family, about 2 years after me coming, joined the cult. And so we actually joined like a commune where once again, I was the only black child out of 300 kids. And yeah, it was just interesting.
You are blowing my mind right now. You are.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I see. So, okay, so you get to this commune. Talk about that. Like, because I'm real curious now about your adoptive parents. The picture I'm getting, they're very spiritual. Like you said, very much we need to save the black and brown, very much this. So how do we get here?
I don't, well, I do know. The best way of putting it would be to say that my adopted mother, and she's passed, my adopted mother was, I'm trying to think of the correct terminology, mentally ill in some aspects. And the mental illness was preyed upon by religious folks. I'll say it that way. My dad, and I always tell this to everyone, my dad's still living. I talk to him pretty consistently. My dad he went with what she wanted. So he didn't really have a voice in the house. When we start talking about abuse, because I underwent a lot of abuse, etc., it was always stemming from the tree of my mother. Whether it was somebody else that was abusing me or her, it was always her. My dad never abused me. I don't really ever have negative thoughts about my father outside of the fact that he didn't protect me the way he was supposed to. But like he himself was a victim as well because of a lot of things that he had in his past that allowed him to be victimized by my mother. So to state this succinctly, my mother is really the root cause. My adopted mother was the root cause of a lot of what happened to me and a lot of what happened to him. Even the fact, like we've had conversations, even me being here was a directive from her. Like my adopted dad didn't really technically want to adopt me. He was just like, hey, this is something that my wife wants, and I'll go along with it. I don't necessarily think, these are conversations we've had down later on. He's like, I don't necessarily think that I even want to adopt a black child. Not that he was racist. He had a better understanding of the dynamics that were going to be involved, but she was the biggest push behind it. So the commune. So like, how do I say this? I want to stay in track, but also like give the details. So I first moved here as we lived in Kansas at the time. They started getting a lot more into, my mother started getting a lot more into what you would call fundamental Christianity, which is essentially like you have Christianity, you have a lot of different sects, but you have fundamental Christianity, which is where we're going to follow the Bible fundamentally, like word for word, letter for letter. And you may have seen some of this, but like, women can't wear earrings, you can't wear dresses, or you can't wear anything outside of a dress, things like that. And that's also in the black community too. I've met a lot of black friends that have very, very religious like upbringing. So it wasn't just on that side, but at the same time, it was like, I'm the only black person here. So as they got more and more and more into that, of course, I guess the need to be separated away grew within my mother. So she found this move in this compound. And the move in the compound was exactly what you normally consider cults to be. We grew our own food. We were homeschooled. Very insular, like you didn't really leave. The men would leave, they could go leave and work a job, and bring the money back and pool the money, but the women and children never really left the compound.
Hold on. So,
I'm
blowing my mind. I'm just trying to visualize you're a kid. Now you're on it's one thing to be in a home and in the community, a quote unquote normal community, but you're in a compound.
Exactly.
You are by yourself. Nobody looks like you.
Nope.
And then you're doing, like, you're homeschooled.
I'm homeschooled. I'm being told that I need to wash my soul. You know, if you read the Bible, fundamentally, supposedly, like, what is it, Ham Shan? One of those people is supposed to be down here. So they're using fundamentalism to say that, hey, you're not as good of us as a black person. So you got to really elevate and be better. So I'm the only black child. I'm consistently having to combat that. I'm going through systemic abuse from both my mother and other folks that are present there. I'm not the only one who's going through abuse. And let me caveat this. I'm sorry. I'm kind of, when I talk, I jump. But the one thing I will say is this, and this is something I've said multiple times. And I've had people who haven't gone through like the adoption story who have trouble comprehending what I'm about to say. And this is very personal for me and myself. So I'm not saying this for everybody else. I have always said, and people were like, really, Will? I have always said I was abused multiple ways, multiple times. Mm-hmm. I will still say that my adoption and being removed from my family is way worse and had way more of an impact on me than any of the abuse ever did. The abuse, I was able to get through the abuse. I was able to work through the abuse. I'm a very strong person. I was able to work through it and give guidance to other people. Whereas the adoption was so impactful because it removed my sense of completely of who I am and where I'm from and what I am to do. Meaning that I know plenty of people that have been abused, and abuse itself is a factor. And they have to work and go through a lot of things, but they also have that foundation of knowing who they are, right? And so that's what I'm trying to explain is understand what it feels like to go through abuse, mentally, physically, sexually, but being by yourself with no support. For instance, I've had conversations with girlfriends and folks in the past, and they're like, hey, Will, I align with that. I was abused. And I was like, I understand that. I'm not
taking away from
your abuse.
Right.
But it's a different scenario when you were abused and you went home and told your black mom and your black dad, and your dad stood up and did something. Versus when I was abused and I had nobody black to talk to, and I go tell somebody about it, and it's just a different perspective. But even that is still just the abuse. What was most impactful for me my entire life, and we'll get into it, is just me not knowing who I was, where I came from, who looks like me, who thinks like me. I have a very unique way of thinking that's even different than some of my African-American friends, all of my white friends, but it's perfectly aligned with my Haitian friends. So it makes sense. Like, through this journey, I've learned how much genetics plays a part in our story, like all kind of things that we'll get into. So I say all that to say that I just want to inject that real quickly. I've had that conversation a lot.
I love that you said that, because I've never heard anybody. I've talked to a lot of people on this show that have, abuse, unfortunately, but I've never heard anybody say, take the abuse and then couple that with, I don't even know who I am, and then put all that together. I've never heard it worded like that. And it makes sense. It makes total sense.
It's the difference. Like, if you have a child and the child gets slapped at school, the slap itself is abuse. But what happens after that slap?
So
can I run and tell dad, and does dad come and support me? That's a whole different emotion and feeling than me getting slapped. I'm going to like a foster care home where no one cares about me. That expounds, enhances, I think, in my opinion.
So when you would tell, who was it, your adoptive mom that you were telling about the abuse?
It depends. If my adopted mom, the first person that abused me was my adopted mom, so that became But I would tell my dad. He was gone a lot of times, so he just really didn't believe it. I would tell people on the compound. They didn't really take it. People were complicit. So I wasn't the only child being abused. I was the only black child being abused, but abuse was rampant on the compound. Yeah. So, as tends to be with cults.
Yeah.
Like, it just wasn't a climate or an environment for protecting the safety of children. I'll say it that way.
Okay. Now, how long do you remain on this compound?
We go twice. So we were there for 2 years, I want to say. So I want to say from 6 to, I don't know exact times. Let's just say 5 to 7. Then we left. And we moved back. That's why I gave you all those states we were bouncing back and forth to, because the compound was in Missouri and then one was in Georgia. So, but Kansas was kind of like the home base where we would always go back to. So 2 years in Missouri, went back to Kansas, And then there was another time where we went to a compound for about a year and a half in Georgia. And I'll get into the Georgia part real quickly because if you remember me mentioning it, I didn't really see black people again. So Georgia. So
what part
in
of
Georgia? Bowens Mill. You ever heard of that?
Never heard of that. What's the largest city it's close to?
I don't know. I'll look it up. But in Bowens Mill, what happened was like the black. I didn't know how to do my hair. None of my family knew how to do my hair.
I was getting to that. Trust me, I was.
None of the hair did.
I was coming to that.
So this was a very traumatic experience. So the very first time, like I remember being with black people again, we're at this Bowens Mill. Where is it at? I'm looking at it on the map right now, and the closest city is it's a country, Savannah. It's like
Savannah. Okay. So
yeah, Savannah,
South Georgia. Okay.
So we're at this convention for. That's the thing is this cult had multiple different like segments of locations. So we were in Kansas, Missouri, whatever. But the biggest convention, you can actually look it up. It's called The Move. Like it's been documented. The Move, THEMOV, The Move. You can look up like the cult and the movement around it. It's a big thing. A lot of white kids have came out and spoken about it.
I wrote it down because I'm gonna go look.
So anyway, they used to have the pastor over it. Or the head, Buddy Cobb was one of the biggest BUDD Cobb. If you look him up, and that's why I don't want to charge you. Like I got like this, so like we could be here for hours. So like I'm a what's the word? I investigate things heavily, and so like the Buddy Cobb connection and all of that, like it goes beyond. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I talk about the kidnapping and everything. It goes beyond just hey, we have adopted families and need this. There's governmental connection. There's governmental connection between the move, between everything that takes place in Haiti, between all this. So I won't get into that in this space, but there's just a lot more that goes on in the adoption space internationally and interracially than what's spoken on and where the driving factor comes from. We'll just put it that way. Okay. So there's a lot of interconnected pieces that very high. I'll say it this way. When I got into trouble as a young man, my mother was able to call 4 to 5 senators on the phone on a consistent basis. I right now can call 3 or 4 senators right now. And that's the level at which a lot of this takes place. We'll just say it that way.
So let me pull you back.
Yes, ma'am.
Bring you back. The hair. Talk about the hair, because I love talking to transracial adoptees about this hair. This beautiful hair that we have.
In Bowens Mill, I went there, and so make a long story short, there was a black family that was also part of the move, like an entire black family. And so they lived near Bowens Mill. And so they had, I believe it was all daughters. And my mom asked the lady, like, hey, like, I don't know how to manage my son's hair. And she was like, oh, I can take care of that for you. Bring him over to the house.
Hold on, before you get there, hold on. What was she doing leading up to that? Were you just getting haircuts?
I don't remember a single, I don't remember a haircut or anything, honestly. So I think I just got buzzed. Yeah, I had pictures. I could look at my pictures. It was just nappy and crazy, and I would have gotten clowned immediately by the community. So it was just out there.
Okay,
so,
go ahead.
I don't know what the black woman was thinking. But make a long story short, I had my hair picked out probably ever since I left Haiti. So she picks my hair out. All I remember is traumatic because it was the most painful experience I've had. I went back to my mom, like, never do that again to me. Like, just keep on doing what you're doing because this is way too much. But essentially, she picked me out, and that's when they gave me guidance. It was like, oh, you got to start maintaining your hair and picking it. So I grew to learn to kind of like how to manage it, we weren't putting oil in it. I wasn't greasing it. I wasn't doing anything. Like, it was just living life. It was just up there. It was just up there.
So did she pick it out dry? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, I think she did. That's what hurt. I don't remember any oil or nothing. Like, I just remember, because I don't think she understood on her side, like,
what she was getting ready to write.
You lose your tenderheadedness. But if it's your first time and you haven't been in the community, you don't know about tenderheadedness, and the woman who's doing it doesn't know that you're tenderheadedness, and so she's used to doing it on her daughters, just picking their hair out instead of me. Traumatic. Don't do it.
Oh, your poor scalp. Gosh. What were do you happen to remember what her daughter's hair looked like? Was it?
I think it was just platted or whatever. It was fine. You know, they grew up.
Yeah.
They grew up with it.
This was platted. Wow, that's very traumatic.
Very traumatic. I have one additional traumatic experience with hair. It'll fast forward, but if you want to hear, I'll fast forward to it.
Fast forward to it.
Keep this in mind. I'll fast forward. So when I was younger, like I said, we'll get into this, but I had some issues growing up, of course, as you would expect. So I did some juvenile time. Let's put it that way. So as doing juvenile time, one of the things that ended up happening was as I started getting towards the end of being like set free, they let me come out and start visiting with my family, my adopted white family again. And so by this time, I'm pretty black. And so I don't want to fast forward this. I want to keep it linear, but I just want to talk about the hair. So make a long story short, I ended up leaving the compound. And I said, you know what? I want to get finger waves. And so like at the time, I'm thinking like I'm gonna get waves. So it was weird to me. Like we went to the salon, and so my adopted mom was like, "Son, I got it for you. I'm gonna get you finger waves." I'm like, "Cool." So I leave.
Wait, time out. I have to ask a question.
Yes.
Were you thinking about waves like when they brush their hair? Are you literally?
That's exactly what I was thinking of. That's what you so I get inside. I'm like, hold on. Why do I have product in my hair? Hold on, why do I have, why am I underneath a dryer? Why the heck is my hair rock hard? Why do I look like Missy Elliott right now? So then imagine going back to a juvenile facility filled with gangsters. Filled with dudes like, I've been fighting all day. I'll get to that later. But we're in there just maintaining. And then I come into the dining hall with 350 plus dudes from the other side, bro. It's traumatic. Anyway, there's 2 traumatic times in my hair. It's traumatic. Make a long story short, put some water on it, blew it out.
What blew it out? No, you don't understand.
I go back and I'm walking in, like, one of the guards like, bro. So, like, I got back at dinner time, and we walked in, and we paused, like, normal, almost like you said, pause, all these different chairs, about 3 other people, and then walked in, and they were like, anyway, it was traumatic.
You know what? But, that speaks to, you had no knowledge of your hair. You didn't even understand how to get those waves, and you didn't have to do all that. No knowledge. Well, how old were you?
I got out at 16, so I may have been like 15 and a half.
And are there pictures?
I went to juvie at 12, and I got out at 16.
Wow. Yeah, that's 2 traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
So you started getting into some trouble.
I did.
And ended up, okay. So I'm going to push past. So now you get out. Oh, hold on. You said something to me. You said by now I was real black.
Yeah, what I meant by that is this. So I'll fast forward. You got all the interaction down here in the States. And when I say down here in the States, I mean what we call the lower 48. Alaska's called something different. Yeah. So when I was 10, I want to say 10, my dad moved to Alaska. And we left the compound. We drove up from Kansas through Canada, and we moved to Alaska. Mm-hmm. Part of that move was to help support, there was the move up in Alaska, the same call. In Alaska, they have a lot easier ability to stay off the grid, not to be part of the overall system, etc. However, at that point, my dad was disgruntled with the move in general. So we got a house. We didn't live on the compound at that point. We had a house. We just interacted and went to church, etc. But we were separated. However, I was still going through a lot of verbal abuse with my mom. I still had a lot of things that were just built up in me for the years previously to that. So I ended up like asking to leave, and it didn't go well. So then I am not proud of it, but I ended up having some issues with my mother. And I acted out with my adopted mom. And I acted out, and I won't get into the details, but I acted out in a pretty severe way under the guise that, this will get me out of the household. But it didn't. They just doubled down and said, hey, you need more prayer, and we're going to do 24-hour prayer marathons for you. So when that didn't work, I logically started thinking, well, I need to find my way out of here. I don't think I can survive it. This is like 11 years old. Wow. So like 11 years old, I was very logical, and I knew that if I continued to stay there, it wouldn't be good or any of that. So and I'm not proud of it whatsoever. I'm very torn in between this, because what I'm about to explain is that it changed my life, but I'm not proud of it. Like, what I mean by it is, if I wouldn't have taken my own life into my own hands, I don't know where I would be today. But at the same time, and I won't even get into what happened, I victimized people in order to go into it. But I was 12 and I was going through a lot of trauma, so that's not an excuse, but it was what it was. I logically said, you know what? They're not going to let me out. The only way that I'm going to get out of this household is if I go to jail. I thought I'd go, I didn't even know about juvenile. I'm like 11, 12 years old. So I plotted out how to do it, executed it, went back to my house. An hour later, the police are at the door. My adopted mom's going crazy. I'm calm because I'm like, I know where I'm going. And I get snatched up 13 days before my birthday, September 4th. I was going to turn 13. 13 days before that, I'm being taken into juvenile detention. So I got taken into juvenile detention. And so to answer your question, it was primarily black kids. Even in Alaska, fundamentally, black people are more apt to get in trouble, even though we're a small segment of the population. So when I get into a juvenile detention, until that point, I had a little bit of interaction. Like when we moved to Alaska, my parents tried to connect me with more black kids. And the way they did that is there was 3 or 4 other adopted families in the general area that had adopted black kids. And so they tried to put us all together. A lot of different varying experiences within that. It just wasn't, you still weren't getting really the understanding and the learning that you needed from a black side, because there's a bunch of blind people leading the blind. We're all adopted. Like, there's only so much that we can connect on, but right. And we can connect, but we can't teach and engage and learn about the culture.
Sure.
So I went to juvenile detention, and when I went to juvenile detention, 70% of the people in there are black. So I always black experience. Yeah. So what I always say is, it's very interesting. I learned the African American culture backwards. I learned it from people who were downtrodden in juvie first. And so I learned, like, I remember somebody, when I say I was black, I went in there, and I don't know if you remember DMX was rapping.
Sure.
But I don't know if you remember that Reebok made a shoe called DMX. They used to be able to pump it up with air.
Oh, I did.
So I'm in jail, juvie, and one of the first things, do you like DMX? Well, remember, I hadn't really heard hip hop or rap or anything at this point. They're like, do you like DMX? And I say, yeah, bro. I'm trying to be like, yeah, bro, I love the shoe. And they're like, no. What are you talking about? I'm like, I love the shoe. They're like, no, this. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. So what I ended up doing was, in juvie for those 4 years, number one, I was surrounded by black people.
Yeah.
I did a deep dive. Like, I had the ability to ingest and learn things very quickly. So I learned black music. I learned black movies, because I would be in these settings and people would be talking about Friday or whatever. I'm like, I don't know what y'all talking about, right? I'm saying, I'm completely out of touch. So Friday, I had to go in there. Yeah, I had to go, don't be a menace to society. I'm like, what are all these things? But backtrack, I never really watched TV, because remember, part of the fundamental thing was not having a TV. So, like, I didn't really have any connection to TV overall. Like, I wasn't watching Friends. I just wasn't watching TV. So then I learned that. I learned black music. I learned the oldies, rap, all of that. I just learned it. Then what ended up happening is, about a year before I got out.
Hold on, I want to ask you a quick question, though.
Certainly.
You begin to learn this culture. Do you
right.
like it?
I do. I love it. I'm like, okay, this is exactly where I should be, which I'll get into some minutes of that. But I'm like, this is where I should be. This is comfortable. I feel at home. And I'll be honest, like, the guys in juvie accepted me. The one thing I've always been, no matter where I've been, and it's the Haitian in me, I've been a warrior. So, like, even though I didn't know the culture, even though I didn't know how to carry myself, I was never a pushover. I was never, that very quickly gained their respect. They're like, little dude weird, but like, he's real. Yeah. And so that very quickly, just became, he's like, we got him, he's so cool. We got to uplift him and teach him. So that's the space that I became. And they were like, oh man, I can't believe that you went through this. As real as you are, let's teach you. So like they just brought me up in the culture from their perspective. But of course, they're giving me like the gangster side of stuff. But like they're bringing me in. So then I said, you know what? Like, I want to learn more though. And so about a year before I was getting out, I knew that there were still a lot of things I needed to work through. I've always been very self-observant. And I said, you know what? Like, I only know one side of the Black community. So I said, I want to have a Black pastor. I'm no longer going to white churches. I'm not doing any of this. I want to understand. I'm a Christian. I want to understand, like, from the Black side of the house. So what ended up happening is they went and found, and this is like another amazing thing, a Black pastor from a Kojic church, Church of God in Christ.
Oh, yes.
And he started coming and visiting me on a weekly basis. My
husband is a Kojic baby, so.
So our relationship, so our relationship just grew. And then he was the best, Elder Williams. And then he started bringing me into his home. So like I started having experiences on the other side. He would come and pick me up on Saturday. I would spend the night at his house. We'd go to church. We'd go get the after church food, or he'd be cooking at the house. He had his son, his daughters, and he just welcomed me with open arms. So like I was like, oh, and he was, at the time, Expedition had brand new Expedition. We get some money at brand new Expedition, so we hopping in the truck. He playing old school music, and I was like, this is so uplifting. It's such a dichotomy and contrast from what I'm getting here. There's so many different sides of the Black community. And even then, though, Tarcia, there was still engagement with my white family. Because remember, my white family, they're still riding along.
I was literally just getting ready to ask you, where are your white family?
They're still riding along. They're coming in and doing counseling alongside. I kind of go through a lot of counseling in there, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't have nothing to do with what he got going on." And then the therapist was like, you got to have ownership. So it was just a lot of that. But the point I was trying to get to is that there was just such a disconnect. So one of the scenarios that popped up, you remember that movie? What was that movie? Not Love Jones. What is that movie that's out there? It's the Black is. I should be showing. It should be at the top. But also, it's like a Thanksgiving movie, and everybody's coming over for Thanksgiving. And the grandma is because the grandma's passed. I'll think of it. I'll look it up. But anyway, make a long story short, in that movie, there's one sex scene. And so we watch it at the house. And so I tell my parents about it. I'm like, man, Elder Williams is so amazing. Like, I'm learning so much. We watched, boom. And they're like, oh my God, what's a man of God showing this in his house? Like, this is so even there was this interaction that we always had to navigate through of the fundamental Christian coming in first, and then the disconnection from the races coming in second, and just creating an entire environment of separation that I still had to navigate through, if that makes sense.
Okay, so now I gotta fast forward because this is just your juvenile experience. Like, you're a kid still going through all of this.
I am.
So now, at what point do you say, now I gotta go back to Haiti, or I gotta find my people?
So I'll make this very quick. I know we'll fast forward it. So I moved to Texas when I was 18 for school. I moved to Texas in 2002. I went back to find my family in 2010. So I moved to Texas, went to school. I won't even get into why I came to Texas, but I came down here for school. Didn't really have a whole lot of guidance on what I wanted to do outside of, I need to get out of Alaska. I did extremely good in my SATs, and I had scholarships to go places. Essentially, I did almost all of my high school either homeschooled or in juvie. I got out and did a year and a half of regular high school. In that year and a half, I took the SATs and I scored extremely high. So I had scholarships to come down here to Texas to go to a couple of different universities. But my friend was coming to Divine. And at the time, I was a computer nerd. I know computers. I just got involved in it. And so I was like, okay, I'll come down. And let me backtrack. The summer before I graduated, he was already down here. I came to Dallas. I was like, oh, Dallas is really Black. It's even better. I'm going to move to Dallas. So I went back up to Alaska, finished. I ended up moving down here. I moved down here. I was going to school. I'll fast forward through. I went to school, got out of school, just started working, enjoying life. But I always knew that I was Haitian and that there was something missing. got super integrated with African-American culture. Like all my friends, I met a bunch of friends in Alaska. They moved down here with me. I had a bunch of friends that I'm a very social person. So I had friends all the way down here. I started rapping, me and my friends. We created a rap group down here. We had a whole record label. We toured in the lower part of Texas and Mississippi and Alabama, all that. So like we did a lot of stuff. So I wasn't lacking anything from the Black experience, but I was lacking from my Haitian experience. I was like, man, like, I really wasn't lacking too much from Haitian. I was just like, I wonder who my family is. I wonder where they're at. But remember, let's go back. I thought my mom was dead.
Right.
So, like, all of that engagement, I'm like, I'm not like, if I would have known my mom was alive, I would have dove in, but I just thought she was dead. I'm like, that's distant. The story that was told to me was that my father was an African-American soldier who had gone down and got my mom pregnant. So I'm just thinking like, oh, my dad's African-American here somewhere floating around. Like, I'm not thinking that much about it. Fast forward. The earthquake happened in 2010. They had a major earthquake in Haiti in 2010.
I remember.
Something hit me then. And it was just like, man, like, that's where I'm from. I want to know about my roots. And I said, you know what? Like, I know I have family down there. Like, I know that I do because Haitian families, I'm sorry, but they're huge. They're huge. So I'm like, I know I got family. I know my mom's passed, but I have family down there. I just need to find somebody. I started digging online at night and just going through, this is 2010, so the internet was a little bit different, but it was still there.
Yeah.
But I just started going through archives and looking for it. I knew I had my adoption paperwork. So I knew what my mother's name had been. And I knew my name, I knew my village. So I just started going through and I found a genealogy page. I started tracking through that, but I couldn't get anywhere for like a year. Not a year, about 6-7 months. Then one day I got onto a page and it was in French, translated it. And there was a professor in the University of Georgia who was Haitian. And he was somehow, I don't know how this all loaded up. There was an email thread and he had emailed somebody else. And he had his phone number and everything. He said, hey, I found such and such. This girl was missing from Winnipeg, which is my village. And we found her family. And he had his phone number. So on a whim, I said, you know what? Like, there's somebody from my village. Like, I'm going to reach out. So I reached out, called him, didn't get anything. And I laid out a pretty good message, like, you know, not everything, but gave him the detail. He never called me back. So I was like, oh, okay. So like 2 weeks later, I was just sitting there and I was just like, man, like, it's messed up. He didn't hit me back. And something said, call him again. And I was like, man, no, I left a good enough message. Like, no, power persistence. So let's say, call him again. So I called again, rang like 6 times. And then I was getting ready to hang up and I hold that up. And I started talking to him. I'm like, I left you a voicemail, et cetera, et cetera. We had a long conversation. He was like, I'm from the city. I'm from the village. My brother still lives there. He's on the radio station. I'll put it on the radio. We'll see what we can get. I'm sure somebody in your family will find somebody. He agreed with me. He's like, Haitian families are huge. We'll find somebody. So 2 days later, I'm just chilling, working, and he calls me. My bad, not 2 days later. I'm lying. The next day, he calls me. And he's like, oh, I think I found her. This is like less than 12 hours later. I talked to him in the evening. This was like midday the next day.
I'm like, oh, really? As in your mother?
And I was like,
supposed to be dead?
And I said, I don't think you can. I think she's dead. He's like, no. The name that's on there is not passed. I don't know where you got that information. I think I found her and we know your family. So I'm like, and he's like, I'm making a connection. We should be able to gather her and call you tomorrow. Remember, this is 2010, 2011. Cell phone penetration in Haiti wasn't nearly the same. Yeah. We didn't have Skype. We didn't have FaceTime, any of that. So the next day, he calls me. And when he calls me, he's like, I got your mom on the line. And I'm still shook. I'm like, my mom's not dead? And so he's like, I'm going to put her on the phone. And he puts my mom on the phone. And the very first thing I hear is, hello, Pitum. Hello, Pitum. Which means, hello, my child. Hello, my child. Are you there? Are you there? And like,
how do you know the language?
I learned Creole. Like, I had to learn it. I got to speak my family. Nobody else speaks English. No one speaks English in my family. So like, I had to learn in order to lock in. I had to learn. Yeah. So I said, I said, like, I had heard this voice that I don't consciously remember ever hearing this voice. I don't really remember my mom consciously. But when I heard that voice, something in me was like, that's your mom.
Yeah.
But then the enemy, whatever you want to call it, kept trying to interfere. So we had that initial conversation. I was like, I know that's my mom. Like, I knew it. But something tried to change that, because when we were talking, she was like, I'm so sorry, son. I'm so sorry. He's translating.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had to leave. I'm mad about your leg being broken. So when she said your leg being broken, that triggered me, because I broke my leg when I was in juvie too. I broke my leg 3 times, just trying to be an athlete. Anyway, we'll get back to that. So having said that, when she said that, I was like, this isn't my mother, because I didn't have a broken leg when I came to America. And so, like, I immediately fell down. So I finished the conversation. I hung up with her. And I remember telling people, like, man, it's like, I don't really think it's that. I called my adopted mom. I was like, because she was still alive at the time. I was like, hey, I'm going through this. I think I'm being played, et cetera, et cetera. What's making you think this? When I was talking to this lady who said that she was my mother, she said the reason that I was adopted was because I was taken away because I had a broken leg. But I never had a broken leg, so it can't be me. My adopted mom was like, yeah, you had a broken leg. You don't remember when you came here? Like,
no, I was 2.
I was 2. I don't see any pictures of a broken leg. You guys have never said anything about it. Oh, no, well, it's a whole reason, blah, blah, blah. You couldn't do this. I mean, how come I've never heard that? She was like, so make a long story short, that verification, and we started the relationship then. So
wow.
We started having conversation. I started trying to learn Creole. Let me back up. When I first met my mom, in those conversations, I found out that my dad was actually a Haitian dad. He's still there, so I know my father. He's a pastor. I have a brother and sister. And so when I first went back, we're 10 years between all of us. So my brother was like 6. My sister was like 17. This was like 10 years ago, so they've all grown. I met them in 2010. I very quickly started putting everything in order to go back home to Haiti to visit them. I had some issues with that because my adopted parents were like, oh, we got him here. The job is done. So we don't need to make him a U.S. citizen. We don't need to do anything. So I had to go through. So when it came time for me to go there, and then I'd never, at that point in my life, I hadn't traveled overseas.
Yeah.
I have since then. I hadn't. So I didn't really have no way of knowing. So I had to go through a lot of stuff, so that delayed it. I ended up going to Haiti for the first time in 2011. I want to say I went in March.
So that very still a Haitian citizen?
Yes. Yeah. I still have a Haitian passport. This is like 10 years ago, so I've gone through everything, but I still got my Haitian passport. We have dual citizenship in Haiti. So, but at the time, I'm fully there.
Fully, right.
So what ended up happening is I went to Haiti. So my trip to Haiti, everyone told me not to go.
Why?
Because it's crazy and can be violent and all these other things at the time. Even Haitians were telling me not to go. I was like, I'm a gangster, guys. Like, it might not look like it, but I was raised in juvenile. Like, the places I've always been, like, I'm like, that's nothing to me. So what ended up happening is I didn't know anybody. I flew into the DR. Yeah. I had a cousin and uncle come and pick me up that I'd never met. We spent the night. My cousin drove me from the DR through Haiti. We crossed the border. We're in the van or in the bus. And I saw pictures of my mom. Hold on, let me backtrack. When I saw my mom for the first time, she sent me pictures. And that
does something.
I had this image of my entire life. Because you see the imagery of what they showed in Haiti.
Yeah. What we talked
People
about
who look downtrodden, greasy, there's a certain aspect. Man, my mama's light. She's airy. Like, my mom is a light-skinned woman who's like 110 pounds and probably the most feminine, light, and frilly woman you can meet. So when I saw the picture, I'm like, and I already had this makeup in my head of like folks saying, oh, like, that's another thing. In my entire life, I was told I was ugly. Like, it really created like a thing in my head because my entire life on the white side, you're ugly, you're ugly, you're ugly. Like, you're so ugly. And so I had this makeup in my head of what my mother would look like and my family would look like based upon the detail of like the out my head that I was ugly. So I used to see all these pictures. I'm like, oh, my mom's probably, no disrespect to them, but one of these like 400-pound, really greasy women. And I was like, I used to tell people like, no matter what my mom looks like, that's gonna be my mom. I'm gonna love her. Like, I just want to meet her. And then lo and behold, I see the picture. I'm like nothing at all what she looks like. So
wow.
that was That was mind blowing. So I say all that. I wanted to level set that when I'm on the bus, my cousin's like, "Do you see your mom?" And I'm like, I'm looking through the sea of all these black people because we go into Haiti, it's like a sea, like you don't see anybody white whatsoever. And I'm like, I don't see her. And he's like, she's right there. And I just see this lady that's coming through a sea of people. So I get off of the bus, and that was the first time that we met, like in person. And that moment lasted for like maybe 15 minutes. All we did was hold, hug, and cry. And then, like, we're crying, and so I had to go through the whole customs process. Was back then was still old. You had to, sign paperwork, and it was all non-digitized because it's Haiti, so everything's by hand. So my dad was there, my brother, my sister. They all came in the bus. So my mom had gathered everything. So the very first time I get to Haiti, what I get the opportunity of doing is I meet my mom, my dad, my brother, sister, my grandfather on my dad's side of the house, because my dad was my grandfather was still alive at that point. So I got to meet. In one day, I went from not knowing family to meeting like 40 family members.
Isn't that crazy?
On my dad's side, he has 9 brothers and sisters. On my mom's side, she had 8 brothers and sisters and all the siblings and everything. So I went from being an only child and the only black child to being one of like 150, to the point where I've said, hey, I got to create a tree. Like, create me a tree so I know who everybody is, because I literally can't do it. And I'm still learning, even to this day, of a couple of there's still 2 uncles on my dad's side that I've never met because we just never been able to be in the same space. I theoretically know who they are, have never met them. So it just ballooned. So
let me ask you, because that's amazing. So I'm gonna backtrack. So that story clearly was fabricated.
It was fabricated.
To be adopted.
Yep.
And I know that you said that your adoptive mother is no longer here, but did anybody ever clear that up for you? Was that ever addressed?
Yeah, it got cleared up, but not cleared up. So what happened was, me being who I am,
you go in the.
I was like, I'm going right there to go holler at dude. My mom was like, you can get killed. I was like, I can get killed anyway. Nobody's gonna kill me. Like, I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen. But I gotta stop talking like that. But it's just the way I live. I don't know. So I'm like, Mom. So my mom was definitely afraid. So no, it never got cleared up directly. In my time in Haiti, I've met a lot of other adoptees, and I made friends with people in my city that are from Haiti, they're Haitian. And make a long story short, 2 of them, they experienced the exact same thing through him. One of them is a girl, and her brother was taken and moved to Canada, and he ended up coming back like myself. And so it was known what was happening. To make a long story short, was he was taking children and just creating a for-profit orphanage. So that's exactly what it was. He was, in some situations, they might have really been an orphan, but he would starve children. He would take children from families that had them. My mother tried to go back and get me back, and they moved me. And then she ended up having to go through a lot of, in Haiti, it's very easy for you to lose your life because it's just a different situation. So she went through a lot. My sister, when she got of age and realized that she had a brother, when she was 15, 2 to 3 years before I went home, she had gone and was like, hey, my sister has the same energy and spirit I have. She's just a warrior. So she went and talked to the guy. He was like, if you ever come back here again. So that's where it was at. So it never got technically resolved. He's passed, but that's what it was. And what happens is there's 2 hypotheticals. On the good side of things, you have folks here that are managing adoption agencies that don't do their due diligence to know where the source is. So that's on this side. On this side, you have adoption agencies that are complicit. So I'll just say it that way. They are helping to drive it.
Helping to drive it. Either way, right. So now, at this time, at this point, in this space, how would you say you are doing? Because now you've met your people, you've gotten in touch with your Haitian side. Tell me about Will today.
It's great, but it's a work in progress. And what I mean by a work in progress, I think we're all works in progress. I will say that meeting my family and going back has been the best, most fulfilling, and one of the most difficult things I've done in life. So I would do the same thing over and over again a million times. Have there been struggles? Absolutely.
Sure.
You have a lot of struggles, number one, from a culture perspective. I had to learn a lot culturally. I would say for me, the biggest issue that I still have is my mother, my biological mom. And the reason for that is because, and I would still take this forever, but my mom, how do I say this? The Haitian culture, children take care of or expected to take care of their family. The Haitian environment, like your family, if you're successful coming out of Haiti, your family has done a lot and sacrificed a lot for you to be successful. Same way as people over here. So it's kind of expected that, you know, that you will give back. I didn't grow up there. My mom hadn't done a single thing for me, like fundamentally.
Yeah.
When I went back, though, I changed their lives. I did a lot we didn't get into, bought a couple of houses, took care of school. I became very financially involved because, I don't know, finances I'm not rich, but like I've always made good money. I work in IT, I'm smart, and I always have side hustles. Like money I'm not wealthy, but I've never been broke, if that makes sense. So I was able to go back and support a lot, which, you know, at the time, you know, I'm engaged here in America. I have a new family. I didn't even get to all my family dynamics here. It's not really the time, but I have, you know, kids that I'm helping to raise and I'm raising here in America. I'm trying to learn and dive into a holistic relationship. Right at the time, I was 2 years into a relationship at the time I met my family. So, and in that relationship, I was a stepfather. So I'm still learning all those dynamics, still learning all that engagement.
Yeah, that's
and
a lot.
Then I meet my family. And so like, then you were torn because your family in Haiti, they need support, but they don't really need support, your mom. And then you have all this over here. So I said all that to say, when I was just doing everything, our relationship was perfect. There was literally no issues. But then I needed to start putting boundaries on things. So I'm like, hold on, like I got to put boundaries on this. I have my life here. You should be saving money, not just blowing through it. There's ways to mitigate what you're doing. And when that boundary started being put up, we started having issues. I tried to explain numerous times, like, hey, like I understand this is culture, but I'm not in the culture. You didn't raise me, so I don't have that responsibility. My responsibility is from a support perspective if I feel that I need to, based upon what's out there, but it's not a responsibility. I still even have issues with the responsibility for my brother and sister because, like, no, and you probably understand even in the Black community, like, quit putting stuff on kids until they get there, right? Like, quit trying to I even in the African American community, I've seen it too much where it's like, I grew up in the white community. I'm like, they didn't ask that much from the child until like everything. That most of the time they don't even ask. Meanwhile, like on our side of things, like I've seen it Haitian and African American, where people got their parents have their hands out. And it's like, hey, like let this kid get established. But I say all to say, like, so that's where my brother and sister, I even have issues with that. But for me, I don't have anything to pay back. I don't have any responsibility. At this point, all I was looking to do was to go back and have this whole of my heart filled with love. And I started getting that, but then it feels like it's associated and connected to money. Anytime there's money that's given, it's great. Anytime I can't give, it goes to the whole other side. And so I will say this, my relationship with my family, my dad, my brother, my sister, everyone it's amazing. I just talked to my dad earlier today. I talk to my brother and sister daily. I talk to my cousins all the time. I haven't talked to my mom since October 18th. So that's the person I went back to find. So that's where it's a little bit
yeah, and you know
it's up and down. I'll say this: we have a great relationship. We have a great relationship. It's just time will extend because I am a strong person. I don't easily back down from my boundaries, no matter who it is.
This has been because you found them in 2010. We're in 2024. I just talked about this. Friend of mine, we just did a thing about this. When you meet your people, you got to set boundaries. You have to set boundaries. You got to go in knowing you got to set boundaries. Yep. When I heard you say, I went in, took care of some schools, took care of some houses, and they was like, cha-ching. and then you had to pull it back.
And it's all just stemmed from my mom. Like, right. And my dad, even my Haitian father gave me guidance on it. Like, he was like when it first came up and I was doing things, my dad was like, "What are you doing?" It was like, "Send $50 every 6 months and keep it moving." I was like, "But Dad, they need. He was like, my dad said, "Will, when you got back," it's my Haitian father. Yeah. He was like, "Well, your brother and sister starving?" I'm like, "No, they look good." He was like, "So it looks like your mom was able to maintain prior to you getting back." I was like, "Yeah, but like she was living in somebody else's house and blah, blah, blah." He was like, "But like, that's the situation she was in. Is that your responsibility?" But I was like, "I have the ability to, and I will help." But then it just started being taken as I have to.
This is what you're expecting.
This is the expectation. So that's where it was difficult. There's also other things that have been.
I wouldn't call it difficult. What I would call it is when you go back and you find your people, you just got to put boundaries. And then as far as the relationships, you just got to let the chips fall where they may. And you're 13 years in at this point. 13. So I think you're, the way that
I think the hardest part with that though is like it being like when it's the person you went back to find, right? Like, so if I had to set boundaries like I had with like a cousin or something, I've had a couple cousins, right? Like, who cares? It's a cousin. Like you do what you don't. But like when it's the very person that you spent your soul, energy, and heart into finding, when you're like I didn't know I had a dad. I didn't know I had brothers and sisters. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted I didn't want to find family. And then when I found I got a mom, I had a mother. So like, everybody else was in the peripheral of that because like that was a brother or sister. That's a great, but like, oh, I have a mom. And not only that, like just the engagement with, I had all this abuse. Like, how do I say this? One of the things that it did and that it creates is that I had to do a lot of self-work to remove my disposition of not trusting women. Because everything that was bad or hurtful or abusive that ever happened to me came from a woman. First, from my mother letting me go, and then additionally from my adopted mother abusing me, and then thirdly from my adopted mother cognitively and knowingly allowing other people to abuse me. So that's in the back of my brain, is I have to work through that. But then I find my mom, and I'm like, oh, my mom's here, and we start to build this great relationship. But then just because I remove funds, you throw me right back into this bunch of like, here's another woman that is abusing me. And I'll say this, like, I've never gotten abuse from a man other than being abused by a man. It's hard to explain. Like, I've never had a man abuse me without some form of connectivity to my mother. And so because of that, like, that's what created that detail. So what made me, like, I used to be very, what's the word?
It sounds like you had a hard time trusting women.
I had a hard time fully, like, I guess you could say that, trusting. Like, I think when you're in love, like, I've always had my guard up at all times. Yeah. Like, I'll say it that way. I've always felt that at any given time, regardless of whether it's a wife, a girlfriend, whoever, that a woman might leave you. So because of that, I've always just stayed. I've always just kind of kept a certain part of me closed off proactively in case that happens. So that way I won't feel how I felt when I was 2 or how I felt when I was 6. Or I have felt all these other times when the woman who was supposed to be there for me wasn't. So, yeah.
So my final question for you, what would your advice be now that you've lived this for anybody transracial adopted that wants to go back to another country and find their people? What would your advice be to them?
My advice would be, number one, do it, because no matter what I've said, I would take this experience again 1,000,000 times. The fact that I know my family, like, in fact, I've had conversations, like I had a conversation the other day, and I said, like, the very fact that I can sit here and tell you that I haven't talked to my mom since October the 18th is a blessing. Like, compared to where it was, like, it's a blessing. Like, the fact that as an adoptee, I can actually tell you, hey, like, it was only like a month and a half ago I talked to her, like versus like not having it at all. So number one, that. But what I would say is, in order to ease the interaction, find friends or try to find people that are part of that culture prior to. Meaning that, like for me, when I first went back to Haiti, I didn't have really any Haitian friends. So I didn't have really any engagement in the culture. I just knew African Americans. If I would have had the opportunity of going to a Haitian church and really getting ingrained in Haiti, it would have helped me tremendously. It would have helped me, number one, to understand the culture. It would have helped me to prevent myself from being taken advantage of, because I would have known how a baseline for the culture. Like I used to get taken advantage of because, oh, this is what we do. Then I talk to a Haitian, they're like, I've never heard that. We don't do that. Like, but if you don't know what's happening and you just, you say that's a part of the culture. No, that's your family's culture. That's not Haitian culture. That might be like a generational curse that your family has, not the Haitian culture itself has. So being able to understand the difference between what the actual culture is versus like your own little family's weirdness is a very dynamic thing. And if I would have had that ability, it would have helped tremendously. And the other thing is highly important is learning the language if you're from a location that doesn't speak English or speaks a different language, because things will always be lost in translation. I can't imagine or can't even speak to the number of times where I've had irritation, my family's had irritation, I've gotten in my feelings for something, they've gotten their feelings for something. We finally get a good translator online and find out it's just translation. That's all it is. It's just translation. They're saying something. At the time I was still learning the language, they don't really speak any English, and like just translation of things. And then understand the cultural like differences, but primarily translation. Like we used to get into arguments and I would think they were saying something and they would think I'm saying something, and we'd get to the bottom of it and it wasn't that. So those would be my three biggest things.
Those are huge.
Yep.
Those are huge. Language, culture, yeah. And you know what? And I'm going to say this real quick. It speaks to the importance of adoptive parents
absolutely
finding a way to place your transracial adopted child into their culture. If you can do so, be mindful of that, because sometimes they adopt and we're just going to do what we do.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so many times like interracial adoption is also associated with a savior mentality. And in my opinion, that's one of the most harmful things, because a savior mentality is in essence saying that there's something wrong with somebody's culture. But like I always tell people, like I've had this conversation numerous times. I used to get into debates and arguments with adopted parents, or not even adopted parents, with people who were questioning my take on interracial adoption. And I would say, well, the culture is fundamental. And they would say, well, what is so fundamentally good about a culture if it's allowing this to take place? And I fundamentally said, no, you guys aren't addressing everything. You guys are looking at symptoms of something, and you're addressing the symptom by trying to give a medication, but you're not looking at the root cause. Let's have a much broader conversation around why Haiti is where it's at and why it's that way. From we create problems and then we get the benefit of those problems. So if Black people, Black countries, Haiti, for example, was allowed to control its own destiny, there would no longer be nearly as large of a market or availability for your savior mentality. If you're not going to address the reason as to why you need to come and save this Haitian child, you're only going to address the symptom. Oh, we have a starving Haitian child here. There's a symptom there. But there's a million and one things that you, when I say you, that your culture has been complicit in creating this dynamic, that you then get to come back and take this child from where he should naturally be and bring him into your world and give him a completely different makeup and engagement that he should have. But then when you start bringing up conversation around why don't we invest or create opportunities in said country for these children to stay with their families? It becomes no. So your savior mentality isn't really about saving. Because if you really wanted to save, you would save the conditions of where they're at. You would look into your government and you would look into whatever is necessary to create a conducive location and environment for people to stay where they're at. Meaning, like, make a long story short, in Haiti, for instance, we have a very old process that people who are real orphans can follow, where the community supports them. Now, there can be abuse within that, like in all communities, but we have an ingrown Haitian process for that, where folks who were living in that until the 70s and 80s when we then infiltrated. And when we infiltrated, we then started seeing the massive adoption. So we created a paradigm, and then we came in and started taking it. So that's why I've always had these conversations with people. And I'm like, well, your savior mentality is one thing if there's really people to save. But if we change that energy from saving these people to creating something that people don't need to be saved from, we would get real change. But no one wants to talk about that. And the reason you don't want to talk about that is because then you won't have an available child that needs to be saved. And then that doesn't fulfill whatever that need, that want, or that desire is on your end.
Well, on that note, that's a mic drop moment. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story. And I do understand that we didn't get into the nitty gritty details, but I promise you, you said something that somebody needed to hear. And your perspective is so mind blowing. I told you, I was like, you are blowing my mind. You are literally blowing my mind right now. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that even with your hair trauma, I see you rocking the two-strand twist.
Yeah. You gotta let it go.
I see you, and it looks amazing.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I try to make statements where I go places, like a quiet statement. One of the things that I try to do, for instance, like I work in a very corporate environment. I'm a product manager at a healthcare company. I'm normally one or two people in the room, if that makes sense. I've always worked with people. I'm like, my man has his hair down to his shoulders and he's getting respect. But yet, so I say all to say, I just show up and show out however I am. And it's been working. Like literally, like I will say this, I think the environment in the corporate world's changed slightly, but it hasn't, like I did before the change. Like I was just like, if I know what I'm doing, if I'm being professional, if I get the job done and I look professional, I don't need to have a bald fade. I don't. No, you don't. I can present. I'm still neat, but I can present myself how I present myself. I can get the job done. I know what I'm doing, and if that's an issue, then all of these other people need to become an issue as well.
Because something that culturally that we've dealt with is, why is it that the way my hair grows out of my scalp naturally unprofessional? It's not.
Thank you.
It's not.
Now I might, like, if I'm at work, depending on the scenario, I might, put it up, put a little ponytail, depending on it. Right. But like, I might not walk into the boardroom straight like that. I might not, though I have before. I'm like, at the same time, like, I still, keep it cut on the side. But like, at the end of the day, what is it? It's neat. Yeah, it's clean and neat. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Again, thank you so much for joining.
Telling
your story. I appreciate you. And I want you to hold on one second. And on that note, bye, family.
Journey on. You need a pie with the good? Oh, yeah, what's the one? Adoption.